Hey everyone, today we're going to be discussing 10 things that I wish I knew and that you should know before watching anime. Now, some of these things I did know in advance to watching anime, but I still think that they're really helpful to know and can help with some of the confusion that might come along. So to start off with, we're going to talk about the distance between seasons. So due to the nature of how many anime shows are created, being largely, if not entirely, hand-drawn, it makes sense that creating each individual episode, let alone the seasons, will take some time. However, while some anime keep a pretty regular schedule for releases, there are some that may go years before seeing another season. Sometimes a show appears like it's done since there haven't been new episodes since, say, 2013, and all of a sudden there's more. So this could be because it's just taken that long to continue the story. Maybe the anime caught up to the manga and needed to wait for more content. Other times it's a spin-off or a reboot that comes years later. Sometimes it's hard to tell which it is because anime seasons sometimes go by their own names rather than just saying Season 1 or Season 3. But let's take a look at Cardcaptor Sakura as an example. The original series ran from 1998 to 2000. Now, jump ahead 18 years, and you will find the series came back for the Clear Card arc. Fans are normally excited to have more of their favorite series and view it as a welcome surprise, but the journey getting to that point can feel long, especially if nothing else is quite filling that anime's place. The second thing I want to look at is the expense to collect physical media and merchandise. So, look, I want to start by saying I have the utmost respect for those who collected anime VHS tapes back in the day. I know that was a truly expensive hobby at the time, spending maybe $30 or more to get only a couple episodes. Still, I can't ignore that while different, the price to collect anime is often largely higher even now than other physical media and merch releases still today. So let's take a season of anime, for example. Upon its initial release, many full seasons, roughly 24 episodes, sometimes more, sometimes less, and sometimes even half seasons, roughly 12 episodes, can run $50 to $60, US dollars that is. So that's for one season or a half season. Most standard releases, excluding any limited or special editions in the US, tend to be in the $30 to $40 range for a full season of a show, give or take. By the time you've bought every half season of a 4-season long show in anime, this is, if you weren't able to buy things on sale and bought them right at release, you could be spending $400 or more. Truth be told, there are often sales that happen in the anime world, so if you keep your eyes out, you can find good deals. And you can also buy things secondhand. But if you're into rare or more niche anime, limited editions, or just shows and movies whose physical releases are harder to come by, you may end up paying even more than I've discussed here. I don't say this to scare you off from collecting what you love, but definitely do that. Collect what you love. If you need to spend a premium, do it on something you truly can't imagine not having in your collection. Now on the side, though, there's also the merchandise side of things. So merchandise is its own beast to tackle, honestly. I don't buy much anime merchandise because a lot of the types of merch available aren't of too much interest to me. There are many different things like pins and standees and keychains, and the one thing that I do find interesting and that I would like to collect, though, are figures, but I think that's where some of the biggest costs come in. It's not uncommon to see figures for multiple hundreds, if not over $1,000, depending on the size and level of detail. I definitely appreciate the craftsmanship that goes into these figures, but the sheer number that are released makes it so hard to keep up for collectors on a budget. That's not to say there aren't budget-friendly alternatives, because there are, but I did want to note the merchandise side of things, as I know not everyone is into collecting physical media. Next is that sub is almost always better than dub. Now, I've heard some people say that they prefer the dubbed version to sub, but I haven't heard that a lot. And I have yet to have found one that I felt that way about. So if you're new to anime, you're welcome to try out dub, which is where the original audio is recorded over in a different language. So for me, that would be English. I would watch an English dub, as that is my language. But there are many different dubs out there. But if you're new to it, you are welcome to try out dub, sub, or both. So sub being the subtitles. I'd encourage that, honestly, but I always say don't judge an anime by its dub. There's something about hearing another language's inflections in your own that often feels off and mismatched. It's more of a commitment to sit down to read subtitles, but I would definitely personally recommend that option. Now, I think dubs have their place, and if you're unable to read the subtitles for any reason, having the option to hear the movie or show in your own language is important for accessibility. The fourth point is how quickly some anime becomes hard to find, be that physical media, but also for streaming. So, anime is more large scale than it used to be, but it's still very niche, at least the shows and movies themselves. The genre's popularity does not guarantee any one movie or show's popularity. And even within anime, if a show is deemed popular, that doesn't mean it's necessarily popular outside of the anime sphere, if you will. There are certainly examples of franchises that have become popular not just as anime, but as media in general. Perhaps the biggest example, or one of the biggest examples, remains Pokemon. You may not have ever watched anime before, you may have never watched Pokemon before, but you've likely heard about it, read a book, collected cards, or played a game. So what about all the niche anime? Well, if you're into streaming, you're probably in luck. There are multiple streaming platforms with large anime libraries to likely find what you're looking for. If you're like me and you like to own your movies and shows on physical media, this can be a bit more challenging. Still, there's normally a great selection. As I touched on before though, some anime become rarer than others. Some go out of print, some switch hands in terms of licensing. This is to be expected over time as with any media. The part that I've come to learn though is how quickly this happens in anime. I think there are a lot of reasons for this, from the niche element to many moving to streaming, to the number of releases that come out at any given time. Some anime may only be available on physical media for a year, a couple years. Here in the US, we're used to being able to go to the store or an online retailer and purchase a movie we watched 10, 20, 30 years ago. For anime, you may be hard-pressed to find a show you watched last year available online, and if it is, it may be at a high price. But what about streaming? Actually, a number of anime titles that you can't find anywhere to stream legally online. As I mentioned, this can be for a number of reasons, but it would be disheartening for fans of a particular anime to not know when or where they may be able to watch it again. And like I said earlier, I don't say this to scare you into buying up every show or movie. I say this as an FYI, something to think about when jumping into a niche watching space that's quite different at least than the typical US viewing experience. I'd love to hear how those from other parts of the world see similarities and differences to the ebb and flow of anime compared to their media releases, physical media, streaming, etc. Point 5, I want to talk about the main genres and the subgenres of anime. So I will apologize in advance. I may say some of these wrong. My pronunciation may be off, but they will be on screen so that you can actually see what I'm talking about. But to start, we're going to go over the main genres. So we have Koromomukwe. I'm pretty sure I said that wrong. I apologize. But this is anime that's geared toward children. So this is for a younger audience. And then you have shoujo, and this can be, you'll see a couple of these in English. They're often spelled like one or two different ways depending. So this is anime that's geared toward girls and or young women. It often takes place in like a high school setting or characters around that age. Many other specific genres can fall into this broad one, especially those like romance. So a lot of shoujo involves romance in some form or another. And then you have shonen. So shonen is anime that's geared towards boys. Often these anime are a bit more rough and tumble, if you will. That doesn't mean there can't be overlap with shoujo or the other main genres, however. And then we have josei. This is anime that's geared toward adult women. And then we have seinen. This is anime that's geared toward men, though still young adult men, so it really targets that like 18 and up demographic. Now looking at the subgenres, what are the genres that fall under those more umbrella categories of shoujo and shonen? So, of course, just like with anything else, you have your common genres and subgenres like romance, mystery, historical, fantasy, science fiction, and many more. However, there are some subgenres that you may not see at all or much of outside of anime, starting with isekai. So these are anime where a character has passed away and is reincarnated or is transported into a new world and or life. So the character doesn't always pass away, but that tends to be the method in which this story takes place. This can also include video game anime, where the characters spend time immersed in a game that's a world of its own. And then we also have slice of life. These are anime that follow day-to-day life. They don't really have major arcs or intense storylines. not to be confused with a lack of heart or complexity. But these aren't necessarily exciting, often following the most normal parts of life, but they are often viewed as relatable and relaxing. And then we have Magic Girl, which is its own kind of subgenre in anime where it involves the female protagonist that possesses magical powers. I mentioned Cardcaptor Sakura earlier. She would be an example. Sailor Moon would be another big example, and there are many more. And then we have Mecha. These are anime with a heavy focus on machines, machinery, mechanics of machinery, etc. So this could look like an anime about robots, tech suits, fighting spacecrafts up in space, etc. There are so many examples. And then we also have some other ones. These ones definitely look into for yourself to find what you would like to read, what you don't. Some of these may contain more adult content. The audiences are really, they vary so much with anime. So it's just important to do your research to know what you're getting into just so you're aware. And just so that you don't make a recommendation like to a kid in your life and say, yeah, you should watch this. And, all of a sudden they're watching Berserk and maybe that wasn't the best decision. Number 6, how closely the anime tends to follow the manga, but not always. So anime tends to follow, I had always heard that anime tends to follow pretty closely to what's often its source material, which would be manga. However, what I didn't realize until I consumed both in close succession, namely Spy Family, was just how similar they are. It's almost as though the panels come to life on the screen. Obviously, there's some added in-betweens as the drawn version for paper can't have the same movement as the show or movie. So, since they're often portrayed so similarly, some people choose to either only watch the anime or only read the manga, while others choose to consume both. It's also common for people to only read the manga where an anime may have left off if it doesn't end up covering all the manga material. I would recommend giving them all a try. Maybe try an anime and then read the associated manga. Then for a different series, read the manga before watching the anime. Number 7. This one's going to be pretty short and sweet. Know that character is older than you think they are, so looks don't necessarily give you an accurate idea of a character's age in anime. Due to the more common art styles, or I should say elements of the art styles you'd see in anime, the big eyes and rounded faces can sometimes point to a character being younger than they really are. This can be confusing or upsetting if it feels like a character is in a situation that doesn't fit the age they appear to be. Number 8 is some of the not ideal tropes that show up in anime, often on a pretty regular basis. So anime often comes under fire even by fans for most times seemingly unnecessary tropes that reoccur across many anime. What's perhaps worse to most viewers is these negative tropes aren't necessarily admonished or shown in a completely negative light. Sometimes they're played for laughs and the viewer is left to decide how they really feel about the given issue. In other instances, it seems like a trope is being glorified despite it being seen by most as problematic. Some examples of these tropes are, I don't think I can say the word here on YouTube, so I'll just describe. It's when family members are in a relationship that isn't a familial one. Toxic relationships, big age gaps between characters involved in a romantic relationship, and so on and so forth. I should note, though, I said toxic relationships, but it's not that an anime can't include something like that and portray it in a negative way to showcase that isn't how something should be, but something like that being depicted that it's okay or even what we should attain to have, that's where the issue tends to come in. These are only some of the tropes that seem to come up in anime. I want to make it clear that just because an anime has these tropes doesn't mean it's bad. In fact, if dealt with properly, these tropes can have their place. It's more so the seemingly passive approach that's often taken, if not condoning the problematic actions and themes, that leaves many anime fans unsure how to feel about certain titles, even those that are largely popular. Number 9 is fanservice. So this kind of flows well after just talking about tropes. So what is fanservice? Fanservice is not only in anime, it doesn't just exist in anime, but fanservice is when something is intentionally added to the movie, the show, the book, whatever it is, just to please the audience. So fan service itself is not inherently bad. There are ways that you can do fan service that are very tame and innocent. But often when we see fan service come up in anime, it tends to be a bit questionable. And you will have some people who just think it's funny. It doesn't bother them. You'll have people who they don't really feel too strongly one way or the other. They don't hate that anime includes fan service. They don't like that it includes it. And then you have people who are more like me, where I often get a bit frustrated just by the amount of fan service and the type of fan service that tends to come up. So some examples that are pretty common in anime are things like bath scenes or beach scenes, where you'll have these girls in bikinis, and it's just a whole thing, okay? Like, bodies don't move like that. People aren't always all oiled up and shiny, okay? Like, these just aren't realistic, and it's just not for me, okay? But it does have an audience, and thus that is why it's included. I do really appreciate, though, that I feel like fan service, I don't know, I want to say that it's becoming less and less in more modern anime, but that's not entirely true. I guess I'm just seeing it less and less. Maybe it's just because I'm tailoring my watching to things that don't include it as much. But like I said, fan service, not inherently bad. There are just some elements of it and different ways that it's often incorporated that I personally don't love. And the final point, number 10, is just because it's animation doesn't mean it's for kids. So I know that here in the US, we've had some movies in our recent history that I think really proved this to adults, that, hey, just because it's animated doesn't mean it's for kids. You would think that some of our long-running animated TV shows would have done that, but apparently not. I think in part it's because of the anime style, though, that people think, oh, this would be just fine for my kids. But don't let it fool you. Even if the characters look young, and sometimes especially so, there are many anime shows and movies that are very adult and are made for an adult audience. So just do your research before you recommend anime to a young person in your life. Just do your research, know what you're recommending, and you'll be all good to go. So I hope that these tips were helpful to you if you're considering getting into anime, or if it's still something that is relatively new to you in general. I hope that this is helpful. And let me know in the comments any other tips that you might have. I'd be open to discussing more in a different video.